You've heard the stories of pirates, buried treasure, rum, and adventure on the high seas. But what if I told you? You wouldn't survive a week on a real pirate ship? Forget the Hollywood charm. The truth is hunger that gnaws at your stomach, water so foul it makes you sick, and a battle with disease you can't possibly win. Tonight, we're going to strip away the myths and uncover the miserable, dangerous, and painfully ordinary life of real pirates. Stay with me until the end, and you'll see why the pirate's life was far more horrible than heroic. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to Curious Before Sleep, where history whispers you to sleep, but not without the truth. Chapter 1: Salt, Sweat, and Wormy Biscuits. The pirate diet that would break you. You probably imagine a pirate tearing into a roast chicken leg, gnawing on it with a satisfied grin before downing a gulp of rum. The truth is, you would have been lucky to even smell fresh chicken aboard a pirate ship. What most pirates ate wouldn't even pass for livestock feed today. Their diet was a slow assault on the body, a combination of salt-cured meat, rock-hard ship's biscuit, and water that tasted like a mixture of wet leather and dead fish. The ship's biscuit, harder than the ship itself, the foundation of the pirate diet, was something called hardtack, or ship's biscuit. Calling it bread would be an insult to bakers everywhere. It was baked not once, but often 2 or 3 times, until every drop of moisture was driven out. The reason was simple. Moisture meant mold, and mold meant sickness or worse. No food at all. A fresh biscuit straight from the galley ovens before a voyage would be pale, floury, and hard enough to chip a tooth. But after weeks at sea, exposed to damp salt air, it transformed into something even more formidable. It absorbed moisture unevenly, leading to patches of mildew, or worse, infestations of weevils. These tiny beetles thrived in the flour before baking and simply went dormant during the cooking. Weeks later, as the biscuits sat in barrels, they would reappear, alive and wriggling. Pirates learned quickly not to waste energy picking the weevils out. They ate them for extra protein. A common trick was to tap the biscuit hard on the table so the insects would fall out. But if you were in a hurry, you simply chewed them along with the crumbs. It wasn't pleasant, but at sea, hunger was stronger than disgust salt meat. The enemy of your teeth and stomach. The second staple of the pirate diet was salt beef or salt pork. Before refrigeration, meat was preserved by being packed in barrels of coarse sea salt. This process kept it edible for months, but it also transformed it into something closer to leather than food. Pirates had to soak the meat in seawater, or rainwater, for hours before cooking, just to make it chewable. The salt content was so high that it caused mouth ulcers, aggravated scurvy, and made you permanently thirsty. And the cooking process? Usually a quick boil in a blackened iron pot over a smoky galley fire, producing a greasy, gray lump that could just barely be pierced with a knife. Over time, the barrels themselves would start to rot, and so would the meat inside. But pirates often ate it anyway. The smell was foul, but after weeks without alternatives, it was still considered better than going hungry. Peas, rice, and whatever was left, if a pirate ship was lucky enough to capture a merchant vessel. The crew could sometimes feast on stolen supplies, rice, dried peas, or even cheese. But without refrigeration, these too went bad quickly. Dried peas were boiled into a kind of paste that could be eaten from a communal pot. Rice often turned musty in its sacks, and cheese hardened until it had to be scraped with a knife rather than sliced. Fresh produce was almost non-existent on long voyages. Pirates who had just left port might carry onions, carrots, or limes, but these disappeared quickly. Without fruit or vegetables, the crew's bodies slowly starved of vitamin C, leading to scurvy. The nightmare of all sailors, scurvy. The slow death in your gums. Scurvy was not an instant illness. At first, you'd just feel tired. Then, your gums would swell, turning red and tender. Slowly, your teeth would loosen in your mouth. Old wounds would reopen, and your skin would bruise at the slightest touch. In advanced stages, the gums rotted so badly that eating anything, even soft food, was unbearable. Many pirates simply wasted away, unable to chew the only food available. It's no wonder that pirates valued citrus fruits so highly. A barrel of limes captured from another ship was worth more than a chest of gold to a crew already showing the first signs of scurvy. The water that fought back, the drinking water on a pirate ship, was often worse than the food. Stored in wooden barrels, it absorbed the flavor of the oak and whatever else was in the barrel before it. After a few weeks, a layer of slime would form on the inside, and the water would develop a greenish tinge. Small bits of organic matter floated in it, and the smell could be overwhelming. Pirates sometimes mixed the water with beer or rum to mask the taste, though this only partially helped. In extreme cases, they drank seawater diluted with fresh water, a dangerous practice that could lead to dehydration and death. Rum, comfort and curse. Ah yes, rum. It's often depicted as a pirate's best friend, but in reality, it was more of a double-edged sword. Rum was issued not for pleasure, but as a way to keep morale from collapsing entirely. It dulled the senses, made the taste of rotten food slightly more bearable, and gave men the courage to face another day of miserable work. But too much rum meant dehydration, poor judgment, and accidents, which were often fatal at sea. So imagine yourself on a pirate ship in the early 18th century. The deck rolls beneath your feet. Your stomach growls. You reach for your morning meal, a rock-hard biscuit that smells faintly of mildew, a piece of salt pork that needs to be boiled for an hour before you can bite it, and a cup of water that tastes like old rope. This is breakfast. Lunch will be the same. Dinner? Also the same, day after day. Week after week, it wasn't treasure or sword fights that broke most pirates. It was the slow erosion of their bodies from the food they ate, the water they drank, and the diseases that came with both. And yet, there's something we haven't touched on yet: how pirates actually cooked this unappetizing food, and the miserable, smoky corner of the ship where it all happened. Because if you think the food was bad, wait until you hear about the kitchen. Section 2. Inside the pirate galley. Smoke, fire, and boiling salt meat. If you think galley means a proper kitchen with a counter, stove, and cheerful cook, prepare to be disappointed. On a pirate ship, the galley was nothing more than a cramped, dark corner below deck, or sometimes just a makeshift fire pit on deck if the weather allowed. It was a place where smoke clung to the ceiling, the heat was unbearable, and the smell of rotting meat mixed with burning wood created a stench you couldn't wash out of your clothes for weeks. The galley fire, a constant risk. Fire was one of the greatest dangers aboard any wooden ship. A single spark could reduce the vessel to ashes in minutes. That meant open flames had to be controlled with extreme care, or not used at all during bad weather or battle. Instead of a stove, the galley had an iron box or fire grate, sometimes called a caboose, bolted to the deck. It was lined with sand or stones to help contain sparks. The cook burned charcoal, not logs, because it produced less smoke, though less still meant the galley was a choking cloud most of the time. On stormy days, cooking was often impossible. The rolling of the ship sent boiling pots sloshing dangerously. Many pirates went hungry until the seas calmed. Others risked burns by tying pots down with ropes and trying to cook anyway. The ship's cook, the most unlucky job on board. The cook's position was rarely glamorous. Often, the man in charge of preparing food was either too injured to fight, missing a limb, or otherwise unfit for regular pirate duties. Some were former sailors blinded in one eye, others old hands too worn out for climbing rigging. They were paid the same as other crew members, but bore the constant complaints of everyone on board. Every day, the cook faced the same ingredients: salt beef, salt pork, hardtack, dried peas, maybe some cheese, and If the crew had been lucky in recent raids, a sack of rice or beans. Creativity was limited. There was only so much you could do with meat that had the texture of boiled leather. Cooking salt meat, a miserable ritual. The process of making salt beef or pork even remotely edible was a long one. First, the meat was hauled from its briny barrel, its surface often slick with white fat or covered in a crust of salt crystals. The smell was sharp and unpleasant, a combination of seawater, old fat, and decay. The cook soaked the meat in buckets of water for several hours, sometimes even overnight, to draw out the salt. This soaking water was often seawater, which did nothing to improve the flavor, but was easier than wasting precious fresh water. Once soaked, the meat was boiled in a large iron cauldron. If there were dried peas available, they were thrown into the pot to soften in the same salty broth. On good days, the result was a greasy stew. On bad days, it was a watery soup with floating bits of gristle. Ship's biscuit, too hard to eat without help. Biting into hardtack without breaking your teeth was a skill. Many pirates softened their biscuits by dunking them into hot broth or rum before eating. Others smashed them with the handle of a cutlass to break them into bite-sized chunks. The galley usually kept a few biscuits warming near the fire, but this only softened them slightly. Sometimes, biscuits were so infested with weevils that the cook deliberately boiled them, both to soften them and to kill the insects. Most pirates didn't mind the added meat in their meal. Hunger erased any sense of disgust. Food rationing. No favorites, no second helpings. A pirate crew might be democratic when dividing treasure, but when it came to food, the rules were strict. Meals were served in equal portions, ladled into wooden bowls or tin plates. No one, not even the captain, received a larger share unless they were recovering from an injury. Each pirate got his portion and ate it where he stood, often leaning against the ship's rail or sitting cross-legged. On deck, meals were short, quiet affairs. There was nothing to savor, only something to endure when the galley went silent. If a ship ran low on supplies, or if bad weather made cooking impossible for days, pirates resorted to eating cold salted meat, raw onions if available, and hardtack as is. This cold ration was hated by everyone, but it kept men alive until the galley could fire up again. On some voyages, desperate crews even boiled their leather belts or shoe soles to make a foul-tasting broth. While rare, such measures became a reality if the ship was becalmed for weeks without a successful raid. Life in the pirate galley was not about cooking for pleasure, it was about survival. Every meal was a battle against rot, salt, and scarcity. And yet, even worse than bad food was the sickness that spread when supplies went truly bad. Because when rotten meat, foul water, and cramped living conditions mixed, disease spread like wildfire. Section 3. The Pirates' War Against Sickness and the Sea. If hunger could weaken a pirate's body, disease could finish the job. Food might keep you alive, but on a pirate ship, it rarely kept you healthy. For every pirate who fell in battle, there were several who wasted away in their hammocks, too weak to stand. The sea was a perfect incubator for sickness. Cramped quarters, foul water, and a steady diet of salted meat made sure of that. The usual suspects: scurvy, dysentery, and fever. The most famous of these diseases was scurvy, caused by a lack of fresh fruit and vegetables. Its symptoms began with swollen gums, aching joints, and strange bruises. By the later stages, teeth fell out, wounds refused to heal, and a man could barely move. The cruel part? The cure was simple: fresh citrus. But lemons and oranges spoiled quickly, and pirates couldn't always raid a port with fruit before it rotted. Some captains tried to store barrels of limes in brine, but after a few months, they were little more than sour mush. Dysentery, known then as the flux, was another constant enemy. It spread when drinking water became contaminated, which happened often when casks were filled in dirty harbors or sat too long in the sun. Once a few men caught it, the whole crew was in trouble. There were no private quarters for the sick. Fevers, often from malaria or typhus, struck crews that raided tropical waters. Lice carried some of these illnesses, mosquitoes carried others, and the crew had no way of avoiding either. The water problem. Freshwater casks were heavy and limited, so most voyages relied on beer, wine, or rum to supplement drinking needs. Alcohol kept better than water, but it didn't stop thirst entirely when water ran low. Some pirates collected rain in sails stretched out across the deck. The problem? Rain was unpredictable, and in the tropics it often came in short bursts that were more tease than salvation. Water left too long in casks took on a green film and a bitter taste. Many men drank it anyway, knowing it could make them sick, because the alternative was worse: dehydration. The ship's surgeon, a miserable profession. If a ship was lucky enough to have a surgeon, he worked with the barest tools: a bone, saw, a few knives, needles, thread, and bottles of rum, both as disinfectant and as painkiller. There was no understanding of germs, so even well-meant treatment could make a wound worse. When sickness spread, the surgeon's only advice was rest, whatever food could be spared, and hope. Quarantining the sick was almost impossible. Hammocks hung close together, and the air was shared by everyone. Desperate remedies. Some pirates chewed herbs or tree bark from coastal raids, believing they could ward off illness. Others drank vinegar or seawater in small amounts. The former may have helped with scurvy. The latter only worsened dehydration. There were even cases of pirates boiling seaweed into soup for vitamins, though it was an acquired taste, and acquired usually meant forced. When disease won, once too many crew members were sick, the ship's efficiency collapsed. Sails went untended, watch shifts were skipped, and cooking stopped entirely. If a rival ship appeared, the sickly crew had no chance of defending themselves. Sometimes, when death was unavoidable, the body was sewn into canvas with a cannonball at the feet and slipped overboard. The funeral was short, practical, and without much ceremony. There was no time for mourning when the sea offered no mercy. Pirates were feared for their cutlasses, but their greatest enemy was invisible. The sea could take a man with a storm, but it was the slow, creeping hunger and sickness that truly emptied hammocks one by one. And yet, for all these dangers, thousands still chose the pirate's life. Why? What made men trade the relative safety of land for the constant threat of disease, hunger, and death at sea? That question leads us into our next story: the strange, unromantic reasons men became pirates in the first place. And that was the real life of pirates. No glittering gold, no endless feasts, just hard work, foul food, and a constant fight to survive. It's strange, isn't it? How the stories we hear are so different from the truth. If you enjoyed drifting through this piece of quiet, boring history with me, I'd love for you to be part of this journey. Please like this video, share it with a friend who enjoys winding down with history, and subscribe to Quiet Boring Sleep for more calm stories of the past, the kind that keep your mind curious, even as your eyes grow heavy.